All right, back with another tier list. This is the AFC General Manager tier list. You see on the screen, I already have the NFC, so I've already spoiled it. If you have not watched that video, if you want to hear my reasonings for why I have, each of those general managers in those specific tiers, check out my NFC version of this, which is currently on this channel. But for now, we are doing the AFC. So yeah, let's just jump into it. Starting off with Eric DeCosca of the Baltimore Ravens. Again, a lot of good stuff. I guess the one thing I would say, he did inherit Lamar Jackson, although he was with the organization, but so how much, did he do there? It's possible to say. But since he became a GM, he inherited Lamar Jackson and has struggled to get the receiving core down, although did just get Odell. I think the Lamar situation and the receiving situation certainly means he can't be S tier. That's out of the question, and probably means you can't be A tier either, but they've done so much else well that I'm still putting them in B tier. The Ravens do a ton of little things incredibly well, but the big stuff is what they've struggled a little bit with, so that's why DeCosca is in B tier for me. The Steelers here, Pittsburgh Steelers, it's Kevin Colbert, who's been at least a higher up since 2000 with the Steelers organization. He's, had a big hand in them winning those 2 Super Bowls, although this is not a historic GM ranking. This is what have you done recently, and I would still say they've done some good stuff recently. The TJ Watt draft wasn't too long ago. Kenny Pickett has looked very good, and George Pickens. I'm going to put this in A tier. The Steelers, everyone talks about the Mike Tomlin never having a losing season, but hey, Colbert's been there all of Mike Tomlin's years. He was there when they hired Mike Tomlin, so because of that, model of consistency, definitely A tier, even if they haven't competed for a Super Bowl in a minute now. Brett Veach for the Chiefs, you could talk me into S tier because, there's definitely plenty to like about with Veach. Worth mentioning, he was not the GM when they drafted Mahomes. If he was, I'd probably put them in S tier, although he was definitely high up in the organization and reportedly was the reason why, at least a big part of why they loved Mahomes so much. He was very high on him, so maybe I should put him in S tier because of that. You know what? I will. Why not? I'll put him in S tier. I talked myself into it. I was thinking about A tier because, listen, the drafts have just been great. There's been a couple of signings I don't love. I don't love the Jawan Taylor signing. Chiefs fans and I argued with that this offseason. Didn't love the Frank Clark decision to trade and sign. I didn't hate it at the time, but it certainly hasn't aged well. But, again, it's a bit of hindsight being 2020 there for me at least. But the drafts, last draft is, put that in a museum, that draft, how good it was. That alone puts you in S tier, got a pair of Super Bowls. Again, the Mahomes thing helps. How did he know Mahomes was going to be this guy? Impossible to say, but he liked Mahomes, so he deserves to be in S tier, in my opinion. Then we have Brandon Beane of the Buffalo Bills, who, again, plenty to like about. I think that the Bills have done a lot very well. I think that the playoff disaster against the Bengals is definitely something that's going to leave a sour taste in people's mouths. But the reality is, this is a team that's consistently built a championship contending roster for several years. To me, I do think this is going to be the third S tier, even though they haven't won a Super Bowl. Maybe that's not fair. Maybe putting them in S tier when they haven't won a Super Bowl is unfair, but I feel like they've come so close several times. They've been a very competitive team, while they maybe haven't quite been Kansas City or Cincinnati. I don't think they have the quarterbacks that those two teams do, but they still have a very good one. So because of that, I'm going to put them here. But you could talk me into A. They're probably the worst of the S tier. I would say that. Cincinnati Bengals. So Cincinnati Bengals, it's Duke Tobin, because again, this is GM rankings. He's been there since 1999. I think he might actually not even be officially listed as a GM, but he does those services. The Bengals are a weird organization. They do things a little differently. But he's the guy who's making the decisions. And, again, some stuff is very good. I always wonder, how much do you give credit for a team for making the obvious first overall pick? How much do you give credit to him for selecting Joe Burrow, everyone was going to pick him first overall, and Burrow ends up being awesome? I don't know, but you deserve a lot of credit for that Jamar Chase pick. That was one a lot of people wouldn't have made, and they don't have the success that they have these past 2 years without chase. Again, they understand new age football is, get a good passing attack. That's number one. However, due to kind of a lot of mediocre years before Burrow, I can't in good faith put Tobin in the S tier, but A tier feels fine for me. What he's done recently has been, I think, very good. I like the Orlando Brown Jr. signing, so A tier for me. Andrew Berry of the Cleveland Browns, Andrew Berry, who, another, analytically inclined guy who, listen, the Deshaun Watson thing is always weird to talk about because a big chunk of why a lot of teams didn't want Watson had nothing to do with who Watson is. It had, on the football field, it was his, to be way too light about it, his off the field concerns. That's why, but again, on the football field, it is a good move to get Deshaun Watson. It just is. I think the Browns have done a lot of really smart stuff, and I would put the GM, Andrew Berry, who's been there since 2020, in A tier. I think he's done a lot of great stuff. The issue, there's been some other issues that I think are kind of outside of his control. Obviously the suspension with Watson was going to mean they were going to have a tough year last year. Defense took a bit of a step back, but I think it'll go forward again. I like Andrew Berry as a GM. I'll put him in A tier. The Denver Broncos are here. Broncos are interesting. So George Patton is their GM, who has come along. He was hired in 2021 and pretty much just immediately, traded for Russell Wilson and had it completely blow up in his face. I don't blame him for trading for Russell Wilson. I really don't. To me, this is a C tier because it's too early to tell, but I don't know. Defense is very good. I think that the Sean Payton trade is smart, in my opinion. The Russell Wilson thing hasn't worked out, but let's be honest, we all would have made that move at the time. It just hasn't worked out. So I'm going to put it in C tier. Now, we have the Houston Texans are next on this list. Houston Texans, it's Nick Caserio, who was with the Patriots organization, came over to the Texans in 2021. Done a lot of little things. I don't know. It's tough because it's another too early to tell type situation with the Texans. I think I'm going to put him in D tier, though. I really do. I didn't get why he got Lovie Smith as the GM. I didn't get a lot of the draft picks last year. I thought that they got a guard who I didn't even have as a top 60 prospect on my big board. They drafted him at 15. They also drafted Derek Stingley Jr. at 3, which that pick I didn't hate as much, but certainly hasn't worked out, especially when Sauce Gardner looks like a superstar. That was a weird pick. So definitely could work their way out of D, but for now, I'm going to put them there. Next up is the Indianapolis Colts. That is Chris Ballard, who has been there since 2017, and there's been some not terrible moves. I think the Phillip Rivers signing, for example, ended up actually working out all right for them. There's been some obvious issues as well. I think the Jeff Saturday coaching hire was mocked, and I get it. I understand why it was mocked. I'm not going to disagree that I understand why that one was heavily criticized, to be honest. Also, the neglecting the quarterback position. I wouldn't say fully neglecting. They did consistently try to get these veteran-type players because they didn't want to just go through a full rebuild. Now they're forced in a rebuild. A lot of things took a step back. And the reality is just that brand of football, I just don't think gets you very far in today's NFL. Again, this is a GM that's traded a first-round pick for Carson Wentz. That had that not work out. They very rarely, if at all, get free agents, which that's, again, part of it is a Colts thing. Ownership does, come down on some of this stuff and make it harder for some of these GMs, which makes them look bad in comparison. But, I'm including it all together. The lack of, paying attention to the premium position of wide receiver, I think is a mistake. They have spent a couple of, second rounders on guys like Pittman and Alec Pierce who are solid, but really they should be spending more resources on that position when it's been a weakness for a while now. And now the quarterback position is a weakness. We think they're going to select the quarterback 4th overall, but as of right now, again, some people have to be in D tier. I'm going to put them in D tier as well. We then have Trent Baalke of the Jaguars, who, listen, has had some high highs. Was a good GM with the 49ers. He was. And even, since coming over to Jacksonville a couple years ago, has sort of built them up. He has. I mean, they did make the playoffs. Now, again, very similar to what I talked about with the Cincinnati Bengals of how much credit do you get for picking 1st overall in the Trevor Lawrence draft and selecting Trevor Lawrence. I don't know. But listen, it was a question of Zach Wilson or Trevor Lawrence, and they made the right pick there. Now, I think they made a horrendous pick picking Trayvon Walker. I've talked about that to death. I don't love every decision they've made. The Christian Kirk contract was probably a bit of an overpay, but also at the same time, he kind of lived up to the contract, after it. So it worked out all right for them, even if that was criticized heavily at the time. Like the Calvin Ridley signing, definitely a mixed bag with Balky, but I'm going to put him in C tier. That feels right to me. Next up on the list is Tom Telesco of the Chargers, who's been there since 2013, so I should know how to pronounce his name, but you know me, not good at name pronunciation. He is next on this list, and listen, definitely deserves some credit. The Justin Herbert selection, not one a lot of people would have made. Definitely knocked that one out of the park. There's been some issues. I don't think the defense is quite what it should be as of late. I think that's fair. But, the Brandon Staley signing, I was interested in. I didn't hate that signing. I actually liked that signing at the time. Thought it was a smart signing. Hasn't fully worked out, but hasn't been a mess either with the Chargers. Definitely, you want to see them take the next step and be more than just a playoff team. But I'll put him in B tier because he has built a consistent playoff team. Part of that being the Justin Herbert selection, which he deserves credit for. But you'd like to see them a little bit better than that. We didn't have the Raiders, which, Dave Ziegler of the Raiders, he was hired last year. It's a complete unknown. We'll see what happens. It's too early to tell for me. Interesting with the paying Derek Carr, but then moving off of Derek Carr. That's the one unique thing. But it feels like the Raiders have a game plan. They're trying to build. They're a tough team that, it's going to take some time, but we'll give them some time before fully evaluating Ziegler. We didn't have the Dolphins. Chris Greer of the Miami Dolphins, who took over in 2016 and, after a few years has really found his groove. I mean, last year, they looked like a championship contender. The kind of copycatting the Rams style a little bit of trading these first-round picks, but also they traded 4 first-round picks, but then kind of traded those back to get more talent and swapped it that way. That trade back certainly has helped out their franchise a lot. The Jalen Waddle draft pick ended up definitely working out. The Tua one, which was kind of the biggest criticism, was they drafted Tua over Herbert. Listen, I'd still rather have Herbert than Tua, but at least it doesn't look as bad right now. With some of these other moves that they've made recently, Vic Fangio, Jalen Ramsey, it's A tier for me, and we'll see. Maybe if they can win a Super Bowl and get up to S tier, it's possible. Bill Belichick, now, Patriots, Bill Belichick, this one is going to get a lot of, I think some people would put him in D tier. I think some people would put him in S tier. Keep in mind, we're talking 2023. We're not talking about historically. Historically, obviously a legend. But as of right now, I do think that he's a bit behind the 8 ball in terms of being a bit of an old school coach. I think that's reasonable to say and a fair knock on him. But what he can still do, building that cornerback room with, peanuts is incredible to me. And, he gets offensive linemen late in rounds that are stars. Then he also drafts okay offensive linemen in the first round and, bad skill players in the first round. He should just trade away his first round picks because he's not great there, but he is great everywhere else. So bit of a unique scenario with him, but I think I'm going to put him in the, I'm between A and B tier. I'm going to put him in B tier right now because, again, the kind of old school mentality it's a bit tough. The New York Jets here, Joe Douglas, who since taking over has done everything well except for one thing, which was the Zach Wilson pick, which again, pretty much everyone would have selected him second overall. I don't know if that's, not everyone, certainly not everyone, but that was the consensus selection. I'm not going to, I would have certainly selected Wilson second overall at the time, so I'm not going to blame him for that. Everything else he's done very well, team has been built very well, and also getting Aaron Rodgers is a great move, assuming it's going to happen. So, A tier for me. We'll see how it goes. Still very young, but the Jets could be a championship contender after, inheriting a terrible organization, or terrible roster, I should say, turning it into a championship contender. Yeah, that's A tier for me. The Seattle Seahawks, they're interesting, right? Seahawks are interesting. So Seattle's here because I'm stupid, and I accidentally put them in I forgot to move them over to the NFC side, so I ended up having an NFC team in the AFC scenario. My bad on that one. But John Snyder, who's been with Seattle since 2010, so he built that Legion of Boom defense. Again, don't love the mentality of kind of how they're built in a little bit of in a way, but at the same time, they got out of that Russell Wilson trade at the right time. They've built now up. I mean, they've been a consistent playoff team basically the entire time he's been there. Yes, they had a small stretch towards the end of Wilson's career, but other than that, they've been very good. I'll put them in A tier. Why not? I think they've been very good. Titans are here. Tennessee Titans, recently made a GM change. It's now Ran Carthen, who is just now being a GM. So it's hard to really say too much about it. I'm going to put them, he's from the 49ers. Seems like a good organization to take a guy from. They're in the C tier, and that is my GM tier list of the entire league. Those were the 17 teams I did for this video. It's interesting. 3 S tier, 3 D tier, and then a lot in the middle that kind of checks out to me. A lot of C tier teams, and then, hey, look at me. Only 3 teams I put below average. Clearly, I'm, a positive guy, I guess. But yeah, that's my tier list. Why am I stupid? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.